Hello. Just before the start of this week's podcast, I just want to stop you just for 1 minute to answer the question that Chris Peel sent me in the last podcast. Now, Chris asked me, how do leadership styles need to adapt and change as your team or organization grow in numbers? And quite simply, I think there are many answers, as there always are. But for me, the most important aspect is up to around 150 people. You can really sort of get a tight-knit, close community, almost a family sense of your organization or people or team. If you're growing bigger than that, leaders need to change and be very, very clear and set out in stone what the vision and what the purpose is of that team, that organization, that company, and bring people on board that align with that vision. And every single day, help people to see all the good stuff that they're doing that meets their visions and link it back to the organization's visions and the organization purpose. So as a smaller team, tight-knit, close family community, really get to know the people and their backgrounds. And then as you grow larger, above 150 people, say, you start to have to think about the vision, the big picture, and communicate that clearly on a daily basis. So that's really how I would go about in terms of how leadership styles change as your organization team's numbers grow. So I'm going to leave you to listen to this week's podcast. This week, we're talking to Eric Greene, who is a leadership and success coach from Denver. And we've got some really exciting things to talk about his Hateful Eight Traits of leadership. So enjoy. Hello and welcome to the 15th episode of the Leadership and Construction Podcast. I'm your host, Michael, and today I'm joined by the absolute brilliant Eric Greene. Eric is a leadership and success coach from Denver. So Eric, welcome to the show.
Hey everybody, thrilled to be here.
Fantastic. No, I'm really excited about this podcast because you put out some brilliant content on LinkedIn about leadership, and I'm really interested about getting your insights today. But I want to start off by really sort of asking you about your background. How did you, where have you sort of come from, your sort of background, and how have you got into sort of leadership and success coaching?
Right. So what I'd say is it's no accident in the sense that I had 31 years in business prior. That's all these gray hairs, just gray hair by gray hair. Had a very successful business career. And I looked up towards the end of it and the pilot light had just kind of burned out on being, truly running and leading a business and being a strategist. And what I had left was just this huge passion for developing people. So I got into coaching and 2 years ago hung that shingle and here I sit today.
I mean, that seems quite a sort of fairly natural progression, in terms of leadership. Yeah, what sort of leadership skills did you sort of learn along your journey, along your way?
Well, and I think that's like one of the interesting things is I was the farthest thing from a natural leader, like growing up. I think I was informed into leadership. I played a ton of sports. I was on a ton of teams. And I was good. Like I was good at sports, but I was never the leader. I was just that guy that did my job. And then getting into the work world, I was a thinker, not a leader. And then I just was thrust into these positions of responsibility and essentially had to figure it out. And it was a work in progress. I don't think I was that good. And then it just started clicking over time. And I think by the end, objectively, because I've had a lot of feedback, I was doing really well. But for anyone out there that thinks it's just this natural thing, I just don't think it is.
I agree with that. I mean, I don't think I'm a natural leader. I think it's something you have to really do work at. But did you receive any coaching yourself or any training in terms of leadership?
I mean, I certainly had some really good people around me, and I view leaders like in a very broad sense. Teachers, professors I had were leaders, coaches were leaders, and people I worked for. But one time I was bored, probably drinking beers. It's my thing. I looked back and I actually counted up across all these people I ever knew or could remember. And I'd say it's about one in every 7 or 8 were just really, dynamic and remarkable. And I certainly learned from them, but I also learned a ton from the others. Like, what didn't I like? What wasn't working for me and others? And I honestly think that informed me as much, if not more so, than the mentors or the books or anything else. It's just what's the opposite of wrong?
No, absolutely. And I sort of, in the same way, do that same sort of thing in terms of my learning and my development as well, trial and error a little bit for me. I think that's me all over, really, in terms of from engineering through to leadership is trying to find your feet and work things out as you go. So in terms of like leadership and success coaching, what does that sort of entail? You coaching individuals and coaching teams, and what level of that organization? Is it a broad spectrum? Is it CEO? What sort of coaching is it?
So it varies wildly, because most of it is personal contacts, people I know or people they know. And so it literally runs the gamut from CEO. I coach several, large company to mid to even startup, like grassroots folding table and folding chair startup. I work with a lot of C-suite or other executives, a lot of newly promoted people, a lot of talented people that are I help a lot of people just figure out how to move up or get where they want to go. And then, yes, I also work with teams. Lately, just because of COVID, that's been a lot more resiliency, change management, things like that. But so really in all forms, sometimes dysfunctional teams, because I'd certainly inherited my share and been able to flip them into high functioning. So it's sort of the whole spectrum. As long as I'm helping out and putting back, that's where I'm trying to be.
I mean, it strikes me as well, but it doesn't strike me as quite odd that you can get to a CEO position and still sort of need some coaching. But I think leadership is this sort of evolution. You're constantly learning, and you're always trying to perfect that craft. Are you finding when you coach CEOs that it's about trying to perfect that craft, or is it really that they got into this position and that they're not quite sure what leadership is still, and they're trying to figure it out?
I think it's more the second one. Like, I go back to my 1 in 7 or 1 in 8 is really nailed it. And I think for many people, they either, like if it's a smaller venture or a startup, it's because they had the idea. So they might have a lot of holes in their game, so to speak. If it's somebody in a larger setting, they've succeeded a number of things and they get promoted based on those successes, but that doesn't mean that they're great leaders. So I find probably most of the people I coach are not fully formed leaders at all. They have holes, they have blind spots, and the real work is in shoring those things up.
So when they recognize that they could do with some training, how do they get in touch? Is it through LinkedIn, or how do clients of yours get in touch with you and then start that training?
Yeah, so most of them find me, as I said, because it's personal contact. But if it's outside that network, yes, they either find me on LinkedIn or they just go to my website. It's I'm Eric Greene, and I worked at my house even before COVID. So my business is Greenhouse Coaching. And so on the internet, the short version is ghousecoaching.com. People simply contact me, and then we just engage in like a deep dialogue, mostly to make sure it's a fit. You know what I mean? Like, can I really help them? Am I the right fit for them? Do personalities mesh, things like that.
Because I mean, I sort of my journey of becoming a leader or learning what leadership is all about started, it very much how you sort of described, I was promoted based on my performance in the engineering side, so the technical analytical side of engineering, and becoming a professionally qualified engineer, and then put into a leadership role that previous to that I hadn't had a huge amount of, hadn't had any training, and I'd only led sort of smaller projects, smaller teams. And so I was really sort of trying to find my way, and then, sort of falling down a little bit, and then trying to reflect on that, why that was happening. And so I went out and saw my own sort of training, reading books, mostly watching YouTube videos. I never really considered actually talking to a coach. This is why this podcast started, to speak to great people like yourself, to get experience from others, and to really understand their insights around leadership and learn from that sort of thing. So I never really considered sort of getting a coach.
Here's what I'd say, like there's many paths upward, but the key is, and really what makes coaching work also makes work what you did. Like most people mean to shift or be better, right? Like, I know I could be less of a micromanager, or I could be less hard on people, or I could be most motivating or more motivating. And they mean to get to it, but the days, the weeks, they get in the way, the to-do list, the meetings, the emails, the priorities, whatever it is, and they just don't get around to it. And I think like the real art and science of improvement is just setting out to do it and sticking to it. So your way, terrific, find resources, training, reading, whatever, and stay on it. Or a coach helps you do the same thing. Like there's not one magic path. I mean, certainly a coach is a good path, or I don't think I'd be sitting here, but it's not the only path.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think through my journey, everything I've learned and everything I've read is all in my own time. I suppose I'm a little bit sad in that I love to sit and read leadership books. And someone that's dyslexic, I finished my first book in years, cover to cover, the other week, and it was a leadership book. It was Originals by Adam Grant, and it's a great book. But I think I can only really read a book, and maybe that's the same for a lot of people, but I can only really read it if I'm really interested, and basically it gives me the perseverance to sort of keep at it. And so a lot of this is all done in my own time, and out of hours, into the evenings, early mornings. I usually get up around 4 a.m. to start the day and try and get some training and some coaching in it early before I start my work. So, do you find a lot of people are that sort of committed, or are they trying to sort of find a way of learning sort of through their sort of day job?
Well, and you said one word in there that really stuck with me, and that's the word perseverance. Like, as long as any of us want to get from A to B in anything and just be better. It's just setting out to do it. And B, it's just finding your perseverance to stay with it and, set out, make a plan, any plan, and just go for it, which is exactly what you're describing. And I think the other thing you describe, again, secret sauce, I think, is not everything you do will come out right. But if you notice it, learn from it, adjust. It's perseverance, stay with it, learn, adjust. That's what evolves you upward. So, I think you are kind of doing this self-paced. A coach can keep on you and accelerate that perhaps. But like I said, many ways to get there.
As a coach then, do you hold your clients accountable? So if, you talk about scenarios in which in their workplace that they could use the leadership skills that they've been learning, and then do you hold them sort of accountable? Do you test them a little bit?
Oh, totally. I mean, I think that's part of it, just having someone kicking you in the ass, quite frankly. So, we work on perspective together. We work on ideas and strategies and plans, but then, okay, that is your homework. And, someone's on the other end. I'm watching you. You best get this done. And not to say it's going to go perfect. It may not. It probably won't. But then what do we learn and what are we adjusting? And it's amazing. I've probably now coached in 2 years, and don't quote me on the number, but along the lines of about 50 individuals one-on-one. I'm saying 49 of them have elevated and gone very far just by doing what you're doing for yourself. So, I think you're doing amazing things, because personal perseverance is even tougher than, having someone on the other end to help you. Very remarkable, I think.
Well, I think,
or commendable.
Yeah, okay. Well, I think that's sort of, I'm lucky in that sense, because having dyslexia throughout my whole life, I've had no other choice. I've had to teach myself certain subjects. I've had to persevere, and you just sort of learn to sort of have this sort of grit and just try and find your own way. I remember when I was doing chemistry at GCSE, I was told that I was going to fail my chemistry, my science exams. That was GCSE, for like in America would be sort of secondary school, sort of like, I don't know what it'd be high school maybe. So those exams were at the end, and I had to teach myself like chemistry, a whole 2 years worth of chemistry in like 5 days. and I managed it, and then I ended up passing, so I think dyslexia has sort of given me this constant drive to question and reflect and look at myself, and try and teach myself, trying to coach myself. Whereas I sort of recognize that not everybody has that same drive. So in terms of trying to be empathetic and have perspective on others, I've got to realize that not everybody's going to have that same drive as I do, or that same ability to coach themselves as I do. So when I'm trying to coach others, or when I'm trying to lead others, I sort of try and remember that, I find it dead easy to go and say, right, I need to learn about leadership, pick up a book or go and watch a YouTube video, and that's what I go and do. It's actually quite harder for everybody. And sometimes you're right, they need that person in their corner, sort of pushing them a little bit to get to the next stage. And so when they're feeding back to you in your sessions, so they must have to be very honest if it went badly. People sort of open up and
but I mean,
very honest.
Also, and again, I think that's another part of leadership. Like you talked yourself about, you're lucky you have that grit. Not everybody has that. I think one of the biggest lessons of leadership is that we're all different. What motivates us, what drives us is different. So even as I coach these people, no two are alike. It's not cookie cutter. I don't treat them alike. And so much of, just even how I push them, how I motivate them, it changes every time with every person, because we're all different. So, I think that applies to how I do it, but also, a big lesson for leadership. This is all about getting the most out of each individual. And if we're different, act accordingly.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah. So what I wanted to ask was, in your sort of coaching then, are there sort of the common mishaps or common mistakes that people are sort of doing around leadership? I know that you've got this, the Hateful Eight Traits of leadership. How have you come across these Hateful Eight? And are there some more common that you see more regularly?
Yeah, and to be clear, like what I experience in coaching is really just a mirror of what's going on out in the world, in the business world and society. So coaching aside, I came up with this list called the Hateful Eight. Basically, it's don't do these things if you want to be a good leader. And I actually talked about it earlier. Where this really comes from is myself along the way, teachers, coaches, professors from university, certainly people I worked for. What did I hate and what did I notice people surrounding me hate? And you start seeing these recurring patterns. And what was interesting, or beyond interesting, is the more I got away from doing any of these 8 things, the better it went for me. And as I said, by the end, results were pretty spectacular. So do you want to get into the 8?
Yeah, go on. Let's hear the 8. Let's go for the 8.
Okay. So the first, and I think this is the single biggest one, is just not caring. Like if you don't care and the people on the other side don't think you care on a personal level, how can anybody work with that? You know what I mean? Over time, yes, you can put the thumb on people. You can, make them do things, but motivation levels shrink instantly if they don't think you care. And if they do think you care, I think you can make a whole bunch of other mistakes and they'll still work for you. In fact, they might run through a brick wall for you just if they think you care.
I think that's hugely important. I do agree with that one. Yeah. And one thing I started doing now is sort of trying to, every time I have a phone call or a meeting, trying to reflect on that straight away, and actually to the point of how was that person's tone when they were talking to me? How are they feeling now? Because I can't read body language because we're all over remote now over webcams. So I'm trying to listen about how the tone of the voice, are they feeling great today, are they feeling bad? Because I'm really interested and care that if they're not having a great day, how can I help to help improve that day? You know, is there something that they're working on that they're particularly stressed about? Is that the sort of thing you're talking about?
Yeah, and I think it goes deeper,
Yeah.
what are their hopes? What are their dreams? Where do they want to get someday? What's their family like, or their situation, whatever. And just the more you know and understand, and the more you just care, just generally care, the better it goes.
Mm-hmm. Brilliant. What's number 2 then?
All right, so 2 would be just show respect. Treat people like grown-ups, grown-ass people. And I've seen so many not do that. Like the not do that is, not showing respect, belittling people, embarrassing them, showing them up, having no regard for their work, not listening to them. Nothing shuts someone down like those things. And again, let's always think about, so what's the opposite of that? The opposite of that is just simple respect. You don't have to take and implement every idea of theirs, but just simple respect. And that, along with caring, again, you could mess up a whole bunch of things if you get actually those first 2 things right. Caring, respect.
That's, as I understand it, taking value in everybody's input. If I think about, I do a lot of design meetings. So, if someone was trying to talk up about a particular idea they had, not shoot them down and not listening to them and then turning on to the next thing, that sort of thing.
Yes, absolutely, that sort of thing. Just any disrespect.
Mm-hmm.
Showing up late and they're waiting for you. Like it can be little things, it can be big things. They add up and they piss people off. And when people are pissed off, they're not motivated.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So what's number 3?
All right, so 3 is not just failing to hear, but failing to really listen. You actually said it just now, but truly listening to people, not even just what they're saying, but what's behind what they're saying, what's actually going on. I think most employees don't feel fully listened to, period. And again, that goes back to respect for sure, but also what's missing is when you're not listening, you're missing ideas to make things better, be more efficient, go faster, do better, because you're not listening.
Mm-hmm. My biggest bugbear is when you're talking to someone and they're playing on the phone or they're trying to send an email, and I just it's disrespectful, but also it just you're not they don't really care about what you've got to say or what you're saying, and I think that's a big one. Listen is definitely important.
Well, totally. Like how many leaders can we picture in meeting rooms pre-COVID, probably worse, when you're on Zoom and the like, where they're literally on their phones doing other things. I got to take this call, the whatever, just so blatantly not listening.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, massive turnoff if you're on the other end.
Absolutely. Yeah.
By the way, did you ever hear the bank account analogy? Because that's sort of what this strikes me as. It's one of the 7 habits of highly effective people. Total classic. Look into it if you haven't. You don't even have to read the whole thing. You can just Google what those 7 things are. But one of them is the notion of a bank account, where every time you do a positive, and that's like putting money in the bank.
Mm-hmm.
Every time you do something negative, it's like a withdrawal.
Okay.
But the withdrawals sting employees so much more than the deposits. So you can have a series of positive deposits, and 1 or 2 or 3 of these little withdrawals like we're talking about just take it all away so fast. Again, just deflate, demotivate, all those things.
Yeah, that's a good sort of analogy to sort of picture that. I think it takes a lot to build up sort of trust and to build up leadership, which is why I think leadership takes so long to sort of evolve in everybody. And then the minute that you sort of abuse that trust or aren't act untrustworthy, then it takes a lot more to build it back up again, doesn't it?
Oh yeah, exactly. I think that's actually exactly it. It's building up trust, and it takes so many positives, but like a single negative or 2 can take that so far the wrong way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So what's number 5 then?
All right, actually we were on 4.
Oh, right. Okay.
Which is never correct people. Just kidding. That's not it. 4 is just like lack of clarity, lack of communication. Like think about it. Go through your whole careers. If you ever thought, I'm so tired of that person communicating. That's not usually the case. But like, what is the plan? What's the vision? What's the strategy? What's the status? Things have gone right. Things have gone wrong. Like there's just not enough sheer clarity out there.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think there's probably 2 aspects to that I sort of see. Some people not realizing that sort of sharing is good, but also people not deliberately sharing, especially when they sort of move through the ranks in an organization. They feel like if they have that piece of information, I'm not allowed to share that with you. I can't share this information with you because you're not senior enough. You're not at that stage I can do that. I don't believe in that. I hate that. I think the more you share with people, especially the people that you're leading, and that in an organizational structure might be junior to yourself, A, they might help you solve problems, but also B, they just respect the fact that they might not be able to solve the problem, but they've got a better understanding of the challenges that you're going through and the organization are going through. That sort of thing. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I would. And in fact, excellent segue into what is number 5, which is lack of honesty, lack of transparency. And you just kind of said it, but put as blunt as possible. People see straight through bullshit. Like whether you think they do or they don't, they know when you're bullshitting, they know when you're holding back. And to your point, like you're so much better off just putting it out there. And so everybody's on the same page. Now, I think, the one exception, there might be something that's truly sensitive or needs to be secret, but then be transparent about that. I can't tell you, here's why, here's what I can tell you, or, I simply can't, but this is the reason. You understand. But so much secrecy and just holding back and half truths and just why? What's the point? And again, put yourself on the other side. Who wants to work for that?
Yeah, it does. I mean, if you don't feel like you're getting the full picture, or you're not getting told why you're not getting the full picture, it just leads to the feeling of untrust and insecurity. And humans are sort of social animals, and you need to have that security and sharing of the information. You need to trust the person to your left and the person to your right.
Yeah, and the message is, if you do trust them, I always want to point out the flip side here. Again, how motivating is that? That's like another show of this person cares and respects me and all those things, and I want to work harder because of it. All these things are adding up, on this positive side of the bank ledger, let's say.
So what's number 6 then?
All right, 6 is just not supporting your people, not having their backs. Like when they're hanging out there, just getting behind them, supporting them, defending them. And so often, instead, you always hear that term. I don't know if you have that in the UK, you've been thrown under the bus, blamed.
Oh, yeah.
The opposite of that is no, just supporting people, looking out for them, not letting them be thrown under the bus. And again, all that's so appreciated. That's how much harder they're going to work.
Yeah, no, I've definitely had that before. Definitely had a few buses run me over a couple of times. Yeah.
And what do you notice every time? Really, there's plenty of blame to go around. You're usually not just one person's ridiculous fault. There's all kinds of factors involved. But, one person tends to get blamed because everyone else is kind of covering their arse, right?
Yeah. And I don't think that's right. I think so as well as sort of it can be a bit of a cop out as well. So if you're a leader in a role, this thing that's happened, it isn't my fault, it's so and so's, or I'm going to go and have a word with that so and so about this. It's a bit of a cop out, I think, for leaders. I think certainly the way I sort of try and act, that is it's kind of like my duty as a leader to take on board any of the crap or any of the sometimes bad language or any of the frustrations from clients or other people on behalf of my team, on behalf of individuals. And then internally, we try and sort that out together. I feel that's my role. Do you think to that? Do you think that's accurate, or do you think that's not fair?
No, I think it is. I think that's another sign of a good leader, is that you're kind of willing to take these bullets for everyone. And again, that's another sign. Put yourself on the other end of this. How often does that happen? And that's such a rare yet positive thing. Each of these things, if this is about motivating people and getting the most out of them, all these things make people want to try harder and work together. And I think that's a vivid example. And sometimes when you're taking these bullets, maybe it's not even your bullet to take. But good for you for doing it, because you have their back.
Well, I mean, when I was sort of learning early days of learning about leadership, one of the things I sort of read was when someone makes a mistake is to come out with it straight away. You've made this mistake, to the point where it's uncomfortable to have that conversation. And I don't necessarily believe in that. I don't like making people feel uncomfortable, but I do agree if they've made a mistake, that they should be aware of that mistake. I think the idea was, if they're made to feel uncomfortable, they won't do that because they don't want to feel uncomfortable again. Actually, I think that evokes emotions of fear, and people then stop being honest and open, is my view. And if someone does make a mistake, you've got to make that clear, but you've got to say, but don't worry, we're going to work this out together. Let's try and analyze, where did we go wrong, and how can we work together to not make that mistake again in the future. What are your thoughts around that? Do you think it's right to sort of make people feel uncomfortable about mistakes that they made, or I don't know, what do you think?
Yeah, so actually we're going to skip over number 7 and go to number 8.
Okay.
I just love your instincts. I think we instantly get it off as we started communicating. My number 8 is, like, the don't would be just failing to hold others accountable or yourself accountable. So in other words, in exchange for doing all these other extraordinary things for people, what are you asking in return? And really what you're asking is for people to deliver back, be for the cause, be for the team, and do good work. And they're expected to do certain things. That's the bargain. And when they don't, because you've done these other things well, it's everything in your right to sit down, again, not to be demeaning or horrible, but to sit down and point those things out and figure out how they can get better. You know what I mean? So I think it's every bit in your rights, but I think it comes because you've earned the trust and the respect of these other points. You know what I mean? And then that frees you up to do that, and it doesn't have to be so uncomfortable. So in other words, long-winded way of saying, I think you're spot on, but it also applies to yourself. Like, if you're holding everyone else accountable to deliver, how many leaders do you see that say, do this, do that, do the other, and they're off not doing those things?
Yeah.
I think enjoying the perks or whatever, or just,
I think in terms of holding myself accountable, I almost hold myself over accountable. Like, I'm super insecure that if I was to, do something wrong or lead someone badly, that I really go into a position where, like, I can't stomach it and I hate it, and I've got to learn from this, because I don't want to ever do that again. In terms of really holding myself accountable. But I mean, there was one instance where I've had, I rarely, which is great, have to have difficult conversations with my team or with any individuals. And when I have had those difficult conversations, I think very much the individual it's subject to how hard you go. To go really hard, how they're going to respond. And if you go softly, are they going to not take you seriously enough? And I sort of try and compare this to, you would have heard of the football team, Manchester United. You know that.
Of course.
Of course. So
I'm
I'm
a London poster behind me. I know the score over there.
So, I'm shamefully a United fan, but full disclaimer that my family come from Manchester. So that's the reason why I'm a United fan. And so Sir Alex Ferguson, who was the manager throughout a long time there, is sort of renowned for being really hard on certain players, really, digging into the likes of David Beckham and Ryan Giggs. But when Eric Cantona was at Manchester United, his approach was much softer and a completely different approach. If Alex Ferguson had gone down on Eric Cantona, like really, blew off at him that, he'd missed a goal, or, he should have passed it, and he didn't perform well, Eric Cantona just wouldn't turn up to training the next day and wouldn't have turned up to the football pitch. So his approach had to be a little bit different. Whereas, if you shout and yell at David Beckham or Ryan Giggs the next day, I'll prove him wrong, and they go out and prove him wrong. And all that's happened is Alex Ferguson now next time to motivate that person, I just need to yell at them. So I do think it's, sort of different strokes for different folks, that sort of thing.
I think there's a term for that called situational leadership, and I think it's one of the best things for all of us to learn. And it goes back to everybody's different. So yes, treat everybody fairly and with respect and some of those other things we talked about. But then individuals, everybody's different and is motivated different and driven different and responds differently. So yes, some people, you need to be really heavy-handed just to get their attention. Others only need a light touch. Others need a challenge. Others are more delicate and you have to tread lightly. So you just meet them where they are, because no two are alike. And I think that's what you're describing. And, I've seen that too, across all kinds of instances, whereas those that tend to be, this is my style, my way or the highway, as we say in the United States, it over time, or fairly quickly actually, wears people out.
I agree with that. So we skipped over number 7. So what was number 7?
Yeah. Number 7 is lacking meaning and purpose. And I actually have a good quick story for this. Do we have time for a good quick story?
Of course we do, yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so the last business I ran, it was actually kind of a passion play. So it was a outdoor company, backpacking gear, camping gear, hiking, climbing gear, apparel, things like that. When I stepped into the business, leading a big team, there'd been literally several years of negative performance. Really downtrodden group. And basically like the meaning and purpose was always, here's your financial objectives. Here's your KPIs. You need to hit these numbers. And it was just this slow leak, like classic big name brand that's known through most of the world. Just slightly down, slightly down, slightly down, year over year over year. And as soon as, like, one of the first things I did, beyond some of these other Hateful Eight things, I mean the reverse of those, was just inject purpose and point out, the purpose is not to hit these numbers. The purpose is, like, this stuff was really well built. So I made this mantra called built for play, meaning, people's workaday lives are a big slog. We build this stuff to last so they can go outside and play and play and play. And our whole purpose is, remember, no matter how hard it is or how difficult or how tense, you're making everybody else's lives better because you're helping them get out there and play. And as soon as we flipped that script, what was fascinating is, like, whole decisions are being made. Is that a built for play decision? Are we doing the right thing here? Are we building this the right way? Is this the right customer service? And it caught fire. And what was interesting is over about a 5-year time, we were growing literally double digits every year instead of being negative, up to about 20% growth a year. We were growing 10, 15, 20% ahead of the industry, sales and profit, all just on there's actual purpose. So in other words, the numbers were hit because people saw purpose, not because we dangled the numbers out there. Like, that doesn't do it for a lot of people. And that's not to say your purpose has to be fun. It's just, what gives this meaning? Because if work has meaning, you want to do it.
Absolutely. I think that's probably the one. It's good that we left that one to last, because that's probably the one that I relate to a lot. And I think there's vision on a macro scale, like you're talking about, giving an organization or giving a large team a purpose. But I think it can equally apply on a sort of micro scale when it's individuals. So sometimes what I try and talk to people about, even if we're doing like a really simple task like service diversions or service crossings, I try to say, who are we designing this for? And usually go, the client, the organization. No, who are we designing this for? The council? No. If we're designing this road, or the service trench that's going to go through this road. We're designing it for the road users. We're designing it for the people that have got to sit on a bus every day that don't want to be stuck in traffic because they've got to dig the road up again to fix the service, or because there's, we want to try and make their lives or their daily commutes better. So when we start connecting, even on the simplest tasks, why are we doing this? Even though it's, sort of seemingly unimportant in the cosmos of the universe, in actual fact, what you're doing by making this design or by doing this drawing or this report, you're making someone's daily life just a little bit better. And surely that's worth the extra little bit of attention, the extra little bit of making sure we've got it right. I think that, so I'm trying to connect things on a vision, on a purpose level, right down to the daily, why are we doing this? Why am I doing this drawing? Why am I trying to make this particular aspect of my work perfect? It's not for me, it's not for the client, it's for the people, it's for the users. Do you think it works like that as well?
Oh, I do. I love what you're saying. And you tell me, is that working for you?
I think so. Yeah. It helps me as well. I've got to use it for myself. I've got to sometimes I can be doing some really rubbish work, and I've got to really tell myself, well, why am I doing this? What's the driver for this? What's the purpose? Who am I helping? And when you start to think about, mostly I design airports. So when I'm thinking about the passengers and trying to make their lives easier, it really sort of start to connect with me on a personal level. If I was a passenger and I had to, get into this terminal, whatever, how would that feel? How would that look like? How can I make my life better? I might be using it one day. There have been occasions I've actually used facilities that I've designed, so I actually experience it from a user experience.
But I think you're right. Like when you frame it in those terms, it's like, this could, be here for years and years and years. And, you want it to be a great experience for people. It's so much more motivating than we need to hit this date and, be under cost. And those things can happen anyway. But like I said, I think the results follow the passion and the purpose.
To add it again, give another analogy to that, down the road from me, there's a water pipe that constantly bursts. Every other month it's burst, and every other month they have to close the same part of the road and dig up the road again and fix it. They do it every other month. It happens almost like clockwork, and it's the walk from our house to the school, and it's the same for many children to get to school. And every other month we have to then cross this busy main road and go around it. And as you're walking past it, you've got lorries hurtling along. They're meant to be sticking to the speed limit, but they've just come up to a traffic light. So now they want to pick up the speed to get through quicker. We've got all these children trying to get to school. And you walk past these workmen who are the face and the representation of our industry for young children who are walking past this day in, day out. And they're not, wearing correct PPE. They're not taking pride in their work. They're and they're just sort of taking it slowly, not really have any urgency and priority about the purpose of why they're doing this. And I just think if you were to get this right, and so that you would never have to close this road again, that would make our lives better. That would make my children's commute to school safer. Or even if you had to close the road, you only had it down for a short period of time, that would be so much better for our lives. And they didn't seem to connect the fact that what they're doing isn't just fixing a burst pipe. They've got to get in and out and do that job better every single time so that the commute for these children are better to school. And I think that's important. And also just presenting yourself. My wife hates it when I talk about people and construction sites not wearing the correct PPE. It's monkey see, monkey do. If people see them not wearing hard hats or not wearing the correct high vis or not wearing goggles or whatever, then people don't do that. And I think that's just poor representation of what our industry is about. We've got to be higher, hold ourselves to a higher level of standards, is my view. So I might have gone on a bit of a tangent then, or a bit of a rant, but I think the vision of being able to give yourself purpose or give a team purpose of why they're doing certain things is a good motivator.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So that's fantastic. One thing I did want to ask you actually was about difficult conversations. And so you must have this with your clients sometimes if their performance, it's about holding people account, and this sort of ties in with number 8. And I sort of have this view that if you shy away from difficult conversations or conflict, that can almost be more damaging. to the scenario or to people's growth and people's leadership. What's your view on that?
Yeah, I share the same view, but I think there's ways of doing it. And I think the key is that if you can turn it into an actual conversation and put heads together, as opposed to confrontation, everybody's better off. So what I find is, first of all, if you go in very neutrally, calm yourself down, get rid of the anger. I'd imagine, especially in your industry, it's easy to get angry on the spot because things can really go badly, right? But if you can just get to that centered place and let them know, this is, we're going to have a conversation here. And when you roll out the problem, do it neutrally, almost like you're detached. I think it just helps. But there's a couple keys. And the first is to just get this other person to mutually agree to the problem, right? In other words, you can't fix it. It's almost like, like the classic alcoholic. You can't, start moving away from that until you admit that you have a problem. So if you can just agree, this was the problem, the mistake, this is what happened, but you walk them into it neutrally, such a good thing to do. The second thing is to then get prescriptive, and you want them participating as much as possible. So why did it go wrong? What was in the way? What were the hurdles, the roadblocks? Like, what caused this, right? That, we could figure out and correct. And then here's the real kicker is people are ultimately self-motivated to do better. So you can put it on them and say, okay, if we agree that this was the problem, this is what's in the way, we'll remove what we can. What's your plan for better? So that they own it. You have a much better chance of not having repeats. And then I think the other part of accountability is how are we going to check in together to make sure that's what's actually happening this time? Like, when are we going to meet again, or what are we going to look at, or what report, or whatever the thing is, or back to the job site, or whatever your version of that is. I think that really helps. So it's mutually come to the problem, identify what caused it or what's in the way, get as much out of the way as you can, let them own a solution. I mean, you can help them, then hold them accountable, and when are we going to meet, what are we going to do? It's better than just anger. So in other words, I think it takes it from you're avoiding it and they're avoiding it to we're working this out every time.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
No, that makes perfect sense. I think that sounds really good. The bit that you added on, which is the feedback, the accountability check at the end, I think that's important, that a lot of people actually just sort of miss off, really. So no, that's
exactly.
fantastic.
Just knowing, it's kind of like the coaching, knowing that there's somebody on the other end watching you.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's brilliant. So one of the things I wanted to sort of ask you was as well, what was sort of been one of your biggest mistakes or one of your biggest lessons that you've learned throughout your journey in terms of leadership? What was been one of the events or scenarios or things that you've really learned and taken away from?
I would say I've had many business successes and, like everybody, some failures along the way. But as I really ponder that, I think the thing that sticks with me, maybe it's not a big thing, but it sticks big, if you know what I mean. So, and I think the lesson in it is trust your instincts. Like, there was one time, like, to their credit, my team came to me, I'm leading a business, and like, I'm good at big thinking and strategy and direction and some of the things we described. I'm not the detail or tracking guy. And so the team kind of came to me, which hopefully shows good leadership that they were willing to do so, and said, look, we need you to promote one of us into this place because that's not you. We could do that. And I'm like, hey, fine by me. Not, that's not who I am anyway. But they kind of jointly recommended, that this was the most senior person on the team who's been here the longest. And I think they should get the job. And in my head, I'm thinking, okay, yeah, but this woman over here is infinitely more talented and better suited for this and, is really going to go places. But instead of going with my instinct, I'm like, well, the team's kind of on board with this. So we put this person in. Not bad, not the good fit. You know what I mean? And had I gone with this other woman, things would have just accelerated. And by point of fact, so she has since then just skyrocketed her career. So I was right. And then, what it teaches you is every time you have these gut instincts, listen to them.
Yeah. That can be quite hard sometimes to sort of figure out what your gut is sort of trying to tell you and connect the head to your heart sort of thing. So yeah, that's really good. So we're going to have to sort of bring, unfortunately, this sort of podcast to sort of towards an end. But before I do, really, I wanted to sort of ask you to, what I'm asking everybody is to ask me a question. And what I'll do with that question is I won't answer it now. I'll answer it at the beginning of the next podcast. So did you have a question that you could ask me?
Yeah, I'm going to ask you what I think is a simple but powerful one. Very simply, what does better leadership look like?
Okay. Yeah. Simple because it's got fewer words, but quite a big topic. Okay, I like that one. Okay. So where does that come from? Yeah, where does that come from, do you think? The question.
Well, I view you as just this emerging thinker in the category and just genuinely wanting to know what you think.
Okay. So just run past me.
All the angles. You've really studied this in so many ways with people and reading and training. So I just love to know what you think.
Okay. So just run the question past me again.
What does better leadership look like?
Okay. Good. Okay. I'm going to definitely need a week for that one, I think. So that's a great question. Thank you ever so much. So let's say the last sort of question I ask absolutely everybody is, and I'm really interested to understand your sort of insights to this, especially after the Hateful Eight that we've talked about. So what is it, do you think, is the most important aspect of leadership?
And I really go back to number one of those Hateful Eight. I think the most important thing is just care. Care about people, their lives, where they want to get with their lives, what their aspirations are, what motivates them. If you care, I still assert you could screw up so many other things and people will still want to run through a brick wall for you. So I'd say just care.
Mm-hmm. Fantastic. Eric, it's been an absolute pleasure to talk with you today. I've thoroughly enjoyed it, and I love hearing about the Hateful Eight. So, if people want to know more, where can they find you on your website?
Yeah, I think the easiest way is just ghousecoaching.com. Look me up if you want to. Happy to just interact with you.
Mm-hmm.
So there you go.
I thoroughly recommend connecting on LinkedIn because of the content that you put out there. It's some great stuff. So, Eric, thank you ever so much for your time today. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Oh, absolutely. As I said, I just love the way you're thinking and approaching this and just growing yourself. And so I just love exchanging ideas with you. So
sure.
I'm honored.
Fantastic. We'll have to do this again sometime. Thank you ever so much.
All right. Take care.